We build our knowledge and relationships about the land, its history, and its peoples, and this commitment informs all that we do at Guelph Museums. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker. Captain Jeff Fry was born in Toronto, raised in Guelph. After his family moved here in 1982, he enrolled into the Army Reserve in 1995, where he served 2 years with the Royal Highland Fusiliers in Cambridge. After completing basic training, he completed Phase 1 and 2 at the Combat Training Center at the Canadian Forces Base Gagetown, New Brunswick. He transferred to the Governor General's Horse Guard and was selected to attend the Armour Crew Commander course with the Royal Canadian Armour School, and later completed the Armour Troop Leader course. He returned to Guelph and was attached to the 11th Field Regiment, Royal Canadian Artillery, and officially transferred to the Royal Canadian Artillery later on. He attended the Officer Staff course, Canadian Army Staff College in Toronto. He held various positions there, including Command Post Officer, Reconnaissance Officer, Gun Position Officer, Battle Captain, and Adjutant. In 2009, he transferred to inactive Supplementary Reserve to start a civilian company. Page 2.
I didn't know you were going to use the whole thing.
In 2016, while residing in Guelph, Captain Fry returned to the Primary Reserve with the 7th Toronto Regiment, Royal Canadian Artillery. In September 2019, he returned to the 11th Field Regiment in Guelph as the battle captain for the 29th Battery as part of the Canadian Armed Forces response to COVID. Captain Fry is a graduate of the Canadian Army Command and Staff College, and currently is the Battery Commander for the 29th Battery Guelph and the 16th Battery. Captain Fry spent his civilian career in investment banking, commercial real estate, and has experience working in Canada, the US, the UK, and Europe. And we're very happy to have you join us tonight.
Right, thank you everyone very much for coming. It's a pretty full house. I was here last year for one of our former commanding officers' talk, and I think it was maybe half of these people, so thank you very much. Do we have any Ukrainians in? Excellent. Slava Ukraine. So, just before we start, I want to just let you know that this is a talk about my experiences. Although I am in the Canadian Armed Forces Primary Reserve, as Ken graciously said, this is not by any means an official talk by the Canadian Armed Forces. This is just my experience here in Ukraine. So I did this presentation for our regiment just to give our soldiers an idea of what to expect and some interest for past tours. We are obviously involved with lots of other operations, and we do have soldiers that are currently deployed and will be deploying, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to get into any politics or opinions or anything like that. I'm just going to tell you my story about my roto in Ukraine. So it was from 2020 to 2021. And so basically what happened was we were right in the middle of COVID at the beginning. And I was serving in an operation domestically called OP UNIFIER, which was the Canadian Armed Forces response to the COVID pandemic. So we were all at home. Everybody was quarantined just like everybody else was, but we still had a job to do and help out with the civilian authorities. And our particular jobs were actually involved with long-term care facilities. So a lot of the staff were gone, they were either sick or they quit, so we were doing it. So we were all full-time. Anyone that could actually do it became full-time. So while I was doing that, the best place to find people for rotations that are already doing things full-time are people that are in a what we call a Class B or full-time environment. So I was asked if I wanted to go from 2nd Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery, which is our regular force counterpart in Petawawa. So there's 1st Regiment in Shiloh, 2nd in Petawawa, 5th in Quebec, and then we have General Support, 4th General Support Regiment in New Brunswick, as well as many reserve regiments across the country. That said, the rotations, the way they work is they are associated with what's called a lead mounting unit. which is the regiment that is responsible for force generating troops from the reserve and augmenting into the regular armed forces. So the regular armed forces relies heavily on us as the primary reserve to fill positions that they need on each tour. So what they do is they put out a message saying, okay, these are the ranks and trades and jobs that we need to fill. And that gets put out to our brigades and subsequently into our regiments. And people basically put up their hand and say, I'm interested in filling this role. And you submit your application through your chain of command, and you are selected to potentially go to tour. So what that does is you start off with what's called workup training. And so I was busy doing a lot of things here in the city, as well as up in Meaford and London, where our headquarters is, to get ready for the tour by having a whole bunch of different qualifications, doing ranges, medicals, and then after all of that was done, we did our pre-deployment training in Petawawa with the 2nd Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery. So we went up there and we actually stayed there for several weeks, where we did specific training and lectures that would teach us about the environment that we were going to, you know, what our mission was, and then we would also break it into our own roles and jobs, work with our team, get to know everybody, and get our medical checkups, vaccinations that are specific to this location. And then we go on, after all that's done, we go on a pre-deployment leave. So it's an opportunity for you to spend time with your family, get your affairs in order, because typically your tours are sort of between 6 and 7 months. So it's quite a long time to be away from your family, you know, your friends and you know, your property, your pets, kids, whatever it is. You've got to take care of that before you go. So that's sort of the lead up as to how that goes. Okay, so I was mentioning some of the units that were involved with this tour. So this is the Royal Canadian Horse Artillery. So that was the lead mounting unit. And these are regiments that are based in 2nd Brigade, which is Petawawa. So led by 2nd Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery, but we did have 3rd Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment with us, which is an infantry battalion. They're light infantry, so that means that they get to run around without armored vehicles, and they have a lot of airborne capability as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. My sergeant was actually an airborne qualified soldier in the jump company, the parachute company, and that'll be important later on because of the school that we taught at. The Royal Canadian Dragoons, which is armor, it's a tank regiment, and so they provided all of the different skills that we were going to go over to Ukraine and teach the Ukrainians. So the idea being is, having been a former Soviet bloc country, they were not used to our sort of NATO standard training and operations and our planning procedures. And so what the Ukrainian government wanted NATO to do, or a multinational team to do, is to train them in a NATO sort of compatible way. So they wanted to be able to fit into a NATO standard of training and operations. And it's what we do. So every country within NATO, so, you know, the big ones that you think of, obviously, United States, Britain, France, Canada, Germany, part of all that, we can go into any one of those operations in an operations cell or headquarters, whatever, and we can all work together because we're all trained on a standard. And so one of our main goals on the tour was to be able to teach very junior NCOs, non-commissioned officers, junior officers, and also more senior brigade staff to do what we do and be able to integrate with us. Logistics was another group that was with us, and they helped us a lot with some of the training and the senior brigade staff. And there was a logistics school actually right behind my school, so we did a lot of integration with them. On the bottom here, we've got some Ukrainian symbols here. So this is the Airborne Assault Division or Brigade, and this is the Marine Brigade. So these are the two groups that were actually making up this, which is the school, which is the Odessa Military Academy Air Assault School. So whether they were Army or whether they were Marines, they all were parachute. And what's interesting is all of these cadets, 17 to 21 years old or so, there's 4 years of it, they all had to jump 9 times a year throughout every year of their college. So rather than us going on these training, like a para training after we're trained, they have to come already trained and then continue their currency throughout their training. Yeah, and this is the patch of the Odessa Military Academy. And then some other multinational partners that we had. This is Danish, Swedish, and British Logistics, the Royal Logistics Corps. So quite a lot. We didn't see work with a lot of Americans in where I was in Odessa, but in Lviv, which is in the west, closest to Poland, there was a lot of Americans there. So it just depends on what capabilities they were going. So I had to update this a little bit because the last time I had this slide up was probably a couple of years ago, and we've significantly increased our training. But typically, when we deploy on this particular mission, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 at a time from various different groups. There are now 20 partner nations that are working with us hand in hand to help train the Ukrainians, and 5 training groups, and that just means across several different trades, so like artillery and infantry, engineers, logistics, sort of that kind of thing. So now we have trained both inside of Ukraine before, so pre-2022 and post-2022. So pre-2022 was inside of Ukraine, and post-2022 was outside for obvious reasons. The full invasion occurred, but total 47,000 we trained and continue to this day to train. 726 different courses and 9 locations within Ukraine, and now currently in UK, Poland, and Germany. Depending on what trades they're teaching them is kind of dependent on where they go. The British are good at training like fighting in built-up areas and trench warfare, and take a little bit of tanks as well, and same with Poland and Germany. So, map of Ukraine and surrounding area. So you get an idea of the distance that I sort of covered. So I was in all of the locations between Lviv and all the way down to Mykolaiv, and Kherson was a training area for Mykolaiv. So the Canadians were spread out of sort of all over the country. At the time, just before, the headquarters was in Lviv, and when I was there, they had a changeover to Kyiv. So Kyiv is the capital city of Ukraine. But when we got into Ukraine, first we flew from Canada, and then we went to Poland, and then we flew into Lviv. So my first 2 weeks experience in Ukraine was spent in a place called Yavoriv, which is a Ukrainian training base, former Soviet turned Ukrainian base. And unfortunately, it's not there anymore. And so you'll see some photos of it. because this was actually one of the first places, the Avriv Training Center was to be hit in the full-scale invasion in 2022. So a little eerie to see some of the photos after the fact, knowing that I had been there, and several other places, particularly in the southeast, closest to Crimea and to Donbass. So arriving right into Lviv, so we have places on every tour called Camp Canada, and it's basically a rest and relaxation. It's a place where we can go and relax and have some chips and some drinks and watch some movies. They've got lots of games. It's pretty fun. This is my sergeant. She was excellent, very fit, and didn't take any guff, that's for sure. So we had a theater as well. We could watch movies. It's a little cold. So this is Yavriv, and these are some of the accommodations that we stayed in. Fairly big, also a lot of Americans were there. But these are all gone. My building, I stayed up here somewhere. So these were former Soviet barracks and then became Ukrainian barracks. And then our engineers came in and actually made sort of these separate little rooms, which you'll see later. It's, I can barely call it a room. I think my door was a shower curtain. Parade square, lots of, you can see all the different nations' flags there. And that's where I slept for a couple weeks. You can see, not very well prepared, very quickly put up. And then we got our outstation. So a lot of times when you go on operations, it's a very specific job and you know exactly what you're doing. But sometimes, due to whatever is needed, we have to shuffle some people. So originally I thought that I was going to be in Lviv for the whole time. But they said, congratulations, you and your sergeant are going to an outstation, which is going to be Odessa. So you're going to spend your time between Odessa and Mykolaiv. So go back to so Mykolaiv is down here, so the beginning of the Dnieper River. And Kherson, so daily, our team that was down in Mykolaiv would go and train Ukrainians in the training area here. But you've probably heard that name. That city was very, very affected and continues to be heavily shelled in a combat zone. So this is where our accommodations for the rest of the tour that I was there until it was April. Quite a lovely city, Odessa. It's a port town and had lots of influence from several different other European nations over time. Like lots of architecture that looked like France, Italy, that kind of thing. Very low on the Soviet architecture, whereas a lot of other areas were, you could tell that they were very Soviet influenced. And a lot of when you travel between major cities, a lot of towns and little tiny villages peppered all over the country. It's like stepping back in time. Very much little farming communities, houses that were, 250 years old, and like a lot of donkeys and donkey carts and things like that. So, not unhappy that I was sent to Odessa. Christmas market, so they did a lot of mulled wine and different foods and lots of Christmas activities there. So this is the Odessa Military Academy, which was originally built in the late 1800s, and it was actually a cavalry school for Ukrainian officers. And then it went into disrepair, I think in the early 2000s. And then they decided to put in a lot of infrastructure into rebuilding the inside of the building and refinishing the outside. However, it wasn't perfect. There's definitely places where you had to avoid not going through the floor. on the third floor. As you can see, right in the middle of COVID. So I can tell you that that was a bit challenging as well, because the Ukrainians had a different idea of social distancing and PPE, and whereas obviously being Canadian Army, we were very, very careful about that, and we had a lot of rules in place to make sure that we were properly protected. But everybody at some point in time got COVID because none of the staff or students had any social distancing or any kind of masking or anything like that. And the commanders, the Ukrainian commanders' idea of that was they've all had it anyway, or they're gonna get it. So anyway, so this is a typical sort of classroom lecture room, kind of like a university. So these gents are sort of in between. I can't, looking at this photo, I'm not exactly sure what year they were, but like I said before, sort of anywhere between about 17 and 21. And so the Odessa Military Academy, you can think of it as something like an RMC, but take away the university degree. So they were not studying any civilian, non-military academics, unless it was maybe something to do with political, but they were all different trades, but they all had their basic trade entering was either they were Marines or Army, and they were all airborne. But they would go off into sub-trades like engineer, infantry, armor, and artillery. In fact, the artillery school was right behind us. So we were tapped, depending on what our trades were as officers, we were tapped a little bit to lend a hand on some of the planning and education. So this is our first time into the field, and this gentleman was the person that I reported to. He's a full colonel, and his name is Colonel Kuz. He was actually awarded the Hero of Ukraine medal in 2014. So the Hero of Ukraine medal is something similar to our Victoria Cross or the American Army's Medal of Honor. So he was responsible for leading the Ukrainian forces to save the Donetsk airport. And it was a brutal, bloody fight, but it's absolutely amazing how they held off the Russian. Actually, most of them were probably separatists, so they weren't in their full force. But they held it. They lost a lot of guys, but they held it. So, and then he had some staff members as well. This is a lieutenant colonel that's working for him. And we're on a BMP range. So it's an armored fighting vehicle. And this is an observation tower. And they have an exercise that they're, a scenario you can see on the map here. And this is my translator, and she was with us the entire tour. So the college would put out a request for translators, and there was probably a couple hundred translators going back and forth here and there. We were lucky that we had a good one. Not all of them were very reliable. And this is my sergeant. More there. And this is the range I was telling you about. This is a BMP armored fighting vehicle. A couple more. So typically in Odessa, the temperatures in the wintertime aren't too bad. They're maybe 5 or 6 degrees. But every time we went in the field, it was minus 17. And all the Ukrainian soldiers were saying, is it this cold in Canada? Because they were freezing. So it's colder. Funny enough, well, I think it was this one. We were touring around, and just after I took that photo, the track came off. And just like everybody else in every other army, it was 5 guys standing around looking at it, and one guy in coveralls bashing away. And he was, Okay, so these are the lovely accommodations that the Ukrainian troops would stay in on their training area. I should mention, this particular training area is outside of Odessa. This is maybe about an hour's drive. So it's actually right on the Black Sea, and you can actually see ships kind of going by just under the horizon. So it does get a bit cold because the wind comes off. But really, like World War I, it's just canvas tents, and they had a wood-burning stove with a stovepipe. And also, part of the training area was how to construct a typical field bunker. So what they do is dig a giant hole, put some revetment over top, sandbags, whatever they had, and then fill it in with dirt. And you can see there's a stairwell here, and that's a stovepipe. So it was also heated by wood burning. But this is actually what they would build forward in a combat zone. There's my translator going down in, and it really reminded me of World War I almost, because it's all built with logs. And these are the lovely sleeping accommodations. So these are bunks, and you just stuff in as many soldiers as you possibly could. Now mind you, during COVID, when you had, I don't know how many guys they had down there, 25, 30 guys. I'm sure that's how they all got sick. More training in the field. So right here, we had, just previous to that in class, what we had done is teach them on some maneuvers. So what we call going down the trace. So a scenario where you start at a start line, and you have several tasks and enemy to clear, and there's lots of drills and lots of things that we need to teach them, particularly in leadership. And so they were extremely fit and extremely switched on, really good weapons handling. Where we needed to work with them was the chain of command, particularly in that middle level of the senior NCO, senior non-commissioned officer, so your sergeants, your warrant officers. They didn't typically have that same structure where we have, typically in the NATO sort of standard, officers are the planners, the visionaries, the ones that produce all of the operational planning and then turn that into orders. And then that gets down the chain of command, and your sergeants and your warrant officers are the ones that execute the plan. So if you don't have that middle layer, it's very difficult to make sure that everything goes the right way and is able to go forward in a smooth manner. So we were teaching mostly this. And here I have some 3 RCR, recce, reconnaissance soldiers with us. They were based with us in Odessa, and they were running their own courses in the reconnaissance school, which was also right behind my school. But we worked together on certain things. So we borrowed them for this exercise. It was a week-long field exercise where they would teach them patrolling, and they would teach them field craft, so camouflage and concealment, how to set up a weapons base, that kind of thing. So this guy's a 3 RCR chap with a Soviet-era machine gun, which they were quite happy to have us teach their own guys on, because obviously that's what they're using. And so he actually set up somewhere on a high feature, and we had them go down the trace, and he ambushed. We had an ambush from a couple different angles, and I could not believe. I was really proud of them. They were so good at what they did, and I like to think that maybe we helped them. I hope so. I'm thinking now that the Ukrainians could probably teach us a few things, because they've been at war for so long. Young Ukrainians, like I said, hard to believe, 17, 18 years old, and they were just so keen and so patriotic to protect their country, and so grateful that Canadians were there to train them and to help them. I would say probably about 25% spoke English. So another thing that we developed after hours, in conjunction with the commander, was an English club. So it wasn't really on our docket to train guys or teach. We're not English teachers. Okay? But after training during the day, we would have maybe a class of 20 or 30, and they tried to put in the guys that had the strongest English. And we improved their vocabulary and their basic speaking ability, but in a military context. So when we're giving orders and we're receiving orders, coming up with a plan, getting used to that lingo of NATO kind of English.
Was it just the one woman you saw, or were there other women as well?
So my sergeant,
Yes.
yeah, so there was quite a few others, but spread out across the country. But in my particular group, she was the only woman with us. But she had her jump wings, right? So she was quite an experienced jumper. Her actual job was parachute. And being at a parachute school, so this is why I was saying I was going to get to that. One of the things that they asked us, which also was not on our official sort of list to train, they asked us to help them come up with a new sort of modernized parachute manual. So they gave us everything translated from their manual into English. And then we looked at our manual, thanks to my sergeant, and we kind of took the pieces that they required, because they have different kit and equipment than we do. But they wanted the procedures and sort of the doctrine to be similar. So we kind of merged those two pieces together and came up with a new training plan, training manual. I don't know if it went anywhere, but it was one of our other side projects that we had. So again, these are our reconnaissance gentlemen here from 3RCR, and my translator. And like I said, 25% only speaking English, so it was very necessary to have a translator. And even just out and about in between travel and things like that, it was very, especially in the small towns, nobody speaks English. So to have a translator was absolutely necessary. And we've got some school instructors here as well. So I don't know if you can see this, but they all have these little patches. We call them morale patches. So they have this thing where they love this particular cartoon in Ukraine. I'm not sure what it is. It might even be like a Japanese cartoon, like Hello Kitty or something. But they all had these different patches with these different things. And they were patch crazy. They wanted to trade patches with us, and all the Canadians were wearing Ukrainian flags, and they were all wearing Canadian flags. I never saw them get down. There's me, as you can see, very cold. This is an AK-74, so everyone's heard of the AK-47, which is the larger sort of, it's our equivalent of a 7.62 or a 303 round. And this is more of a NATO standard. So like our rifle is a 5.56 millimeter, and that's sort of the closest you can compare the two. On the ranges, so teaching them, so this wasn't part of our training. The Ukrainians were running their own ranges, but this was just on our way into the training area. A couple of sort of fighting in built-up areas, they call it. So it's training within an urban warfare context. This is a BRDM 80A, which is a BTR. So this is a troop transport. So for the size of the vehicle, you would think that you would get a lot more people in it, but it's very, very crammed. You can only get about 8 soldiers in the back, and there's a driver, and this gun is like a 25 millimeter, and it's an autonomous firing gun. So it's all automatic with the joystick, and they have sensors and a video screen, and it's just auto loading. So they got us a couple rides in this, but it's a newer version, but it's essentially a Soviet era thing. So this is another thing that I'm sure has changed quite a lot since I was there. The kit and equipment predominantly that the Ukrainians had, particularly before the full-scale invasion, was all really Soviet technology. And since then, they've been getting a whole bunch more kit from the West. And I'm sure they still have a lot of this, but they're phasing sort of out of that kit. But not that it's bad, it's just getting very, very old. The Ukrainians are extremely good engineers, and they made really good, solid kit, but this is probably from the 70s or early 80s. A lot of people think that everything's Russian, but during the Soviet times, a lot of industry and a lot of design and builds were actually in Ukraine. A lot of aircraft and a lot of vehicles. So just going back to some of the organizations that we trained. So above and beyond the years 1 to 4 cadets, we also trained brigade staff. So they would come in from, actually from the front in the Donbass region, and they would send their brigade staff. So basically that's a full colonel, brigade commander, and all of the staff that does all the planning and preparation to come up with an operation. And they didn't really have, once again, they didn't have that sort of cohesiveness with NATO. So every 2 weeks we would bring in a whole new set of brigade staff, and this is one of the brigades. This is the 25th. And very skeptical at the beginning, especially a senior officer, a full colonel. You know, kind of, I'm not really sure if you foreigners really need to be telling me how to do my job. I'm doing it just fine. And probably one of the most rewarding things that I had happen was one of their full colonels came up to me at the end of the course, just before we were doing our photo, and he shook my hand and he said, I was wrong, this was completely worth it, and you guys did a great job, and I feel that my staff is better prepared. And so I thought, great, this is exactly what we're here for, to do. So we have something that we all take. So I think Ken had mentioned the Canadian Army Command and Staff College, which is in Kingston, and that prepares junior officers that are usually in the captain level to go to more senior command and hold staff level jobs in the planning process. So that course that we do here, there's full-time and part-time, whether you're regular or reserve, which is usually over between sort of an 8-month to 15-month period, depending on what you do. We compress that into 2 weeks. So I can't tell you that it was exactly the same, but they came prepared and they were switched on and they were keen because they were doing this for real. And so they were very, very appreciative. And this is part of the staff. This was a major, he's a Marine, and he was championing this, and he was so happy that we were able to come in and put a whole program together for them. So we kind of put a mini Army operations course together. He had spent some time with the US Marines on exchange, and so he was super keen. And his English was very good as well. If you didn't know who he was and you just saw him, you'd think he was a US Marine. Some of my staff as well, obviously all masked up. All jumpers. I felt like a little bit out of place. Their wings. So this is actually so he's following the procedure for the training plan. And there's me teaching on a trace. And this is going through wargaming and walking through an entire plan from sort of A to Z with all of the staff positions. So this is an instructor, and he's evaluating everybody from the commander right through the staff. And they used whatever they could get their hands on. We have this plastic that goes over top of the map, and then we can draw symbols, and we can draw different places that we're going and our scheme of maneuver, how we're going to do it. And it's just a big roll of this clear plastic sheet that we just tape down. They were using shower curtains that they just wrapped up and put it, so whatever they could find. And then finally we were able to get them some, we call it talc, and they were very happy. And there's the commander giving his planning guidance on the trace, and his keen staff all being evaluated. And these are the Canadian teaching staff. So these two gentlemen here, we brought them in from Mykolaiv, and they had attended the, I think it was the U.S. Marine staff training instructor course. So they were brought in, they were specifically on tour to teach this kind of stuff. And my sergeant, and then this gentleman is from the Royal Canadian Logistics Service. I can't keep up when they change all these things. And so we brought him in because every piece of the puzzle in a plan is there. So your infantry, your engineers, your artillery, your logistics, and they didn't really have anyone, and that was the one thing that they were sort of lacking. They were really, some previous tours had sort of got them going, and we were just sort of solidifying that and polishing that. But the one thing that they didn't have really going for them was logistics, and I'm sure that you can probably attest to that. We actually have a couple of logistics officers in the house. One of them, I guess you were in the same school as me, right?
Same school in 2018, yeah.
In 2018, so probably I saw a bit of a difference even from there. This is the graduating, the first graduating class of the Odessa Military Academy Staff College, or however you want to call it. And this gentleman had been wounded in combat, and a lot of the instructors were wounded and no longer being able to serve in a combat role, were sent to the college because of their vast experience. And so everything that we gave him in English, he had immediately translated into Ukrainian, like within a couple of days. And I've never seen anyone so happy, because no one would listen to him and no one would ever get anything done for him to start these courses. And finally we had the team together to do so. And this is the colonel I was telling you about, who just before that photo came up to me and shook my hand. And that was really a good feeling. All the Canadians have masks.
Yeah.
This is on one of my trips between Odessa and Mykolaiv. So we're heading southeast. And the conditions of the roads were absolutely insane. So you would have a 6-foot pothole in the middle of, say, the 401. And people would continue to be driving at 120 or 130 and just go around it, including transport trucks. So if you weren't well versed with the navigation and where these things were, then you were a little bit in trouble. But I have a video of actually me and my sergeant talking, going over these roads, and we're shaking so much, you can't even understand what we're saying. But this is a MiG-15, I think, on the pedestal. There's lots of leftover Soviet stuff on pedestals and guns and T-34 tanks and all that. And then, yeah, like this is definitely Soviet Union sort of time frame. It's a World War II statue. It doesn't give it justice because we're actually very far away, and that's like almost like a mountain. And that's basically the size of a small apartment building, that statue. Okay, so we're into Kyiv. So we're looking at the statue in Maidan Square. Does anyone know Maidan Square? So this is important because this is where it all started. So in 2014, the protests happened with the government that was there at the time. I'm not sure exactly how long it lasted. I think it was a month. But basically, the Ukrainians had enough with sort of their government being sort of puppet run by the Russians. So they put in a big protest and a big encampment, and if just try to look it up online. There's lots of videos about it, but it was absolutely insane. And about 108 civilians were killed in these riots by riot police. And you may recall that the president at the time, once this was over, secretly slipped out of the country, and that's when elections happened to eventually get Zelensky.
If I may, there's a really good film on Netflix, a documentary called Winter on Fire.
I've seen that.
All
Yeah.
about this. It's quite.
Winter on Fire explains the whole thing. It's pretty insane. Anyway, we were there obviously about 5 years after, I'd say. So this is what kicks everything off. And in 2015, this is when the multinational group, the NATO countries, including Canada, decided to provide support to Ukraine. So we, as I was saying before about how many troops were trained, we have had troops training in Ukraine from 2015 to 2022, and then after 2022 to today, currently, and the other countries. But obviously we had to leave the country physically. So I'm standing on a bridge here, and you can see all of these little rows here. These are all memorials for individuals that were killed. And this is where the snipers ended up killing everybody. So all the people down this avenue of approach and in the square were shot by snipers. Happier times. So we went to Mykolaiv, to the group that was, the Canadian group that was there. Because I was an outstation in Odessa, as much as we wanted to stay in Odessa, because it was beautiful around Christmas time, for morale and welfare, they decided to bring everybody in that region to one place. So what's really nice about being on any tour, and anyone who was in the military or was in the military that's been on tour during Christmas time, holiday time, knows this. Sir, I don't know if you were in overseas during that
Summer.
But every soldier gets a gift given to them by Canada. So our morale and welfare services basically put together a kit, and it gives us things like magazines and razors and candy and stuff that is useful to us. And they also have civilians sponsor, and they can actually send in things. They have a list. This is what we need, and then they'll put it in a box. And also, it's our mail call. So anybody from home could send you gifts and cards and things like that several months in advance, because I think we had a logistics run, like an aircraft come in once a month. But you had to if you wanted something, you had to pre-plan. Anyway, so we're all standing in the hallway, ready to get our gift from the sergeant major, who was dressed in a Santa hat. And a tradition that we have going back to World War I is the officers started to serve the soldiers a meal around Christmas time and thank them for all their efforts, because they were obviously getting the majority of the brunt of the combat. The officers had a little bit of a better life, not that much better, but it was a thank you. And so we continue that to this day. And in fact, we have our soldiers appreciation dinner coming up in December ourselves. And every regiment will do that. So we commandeered the hotel kitchen, much to the surprise of the Ukrainian cooks. But they were good. They gave us everything through broken English. We could figure out what we needed. I think the only incident was somebody baked potatoes on waxed paper instead of parchment paper. And we set up our little Christmas meal, holiday meal, and they did their best. They brought us roast chicken and root vegetables and things like that. But they were very nice to us. Unfortunately, that hotel is also gone. It was bombed early in the war. And this is my sergeant major that came down to help us out with the operational planning course. He was the 3 RCR, also a jumper, and he decided it would be really cool to get a Adidas tracksuit and put the Royal Canadian Regiment emblem on it. But I wanted to show this because in the hotel, we have, any hotel or any place that we stay, they have a common area they set up for us for resting and relaxing, because we have very long days. You know, you come back, they provide us with water and food and pop and chips, and sometimes if it's someone's birthday, they'll a little party, someone goes into town and gets cake and all that sort of thing. So it's not too bad. This is my office, which was about this big. They gave us an entire lecture room as an office, and I think this is towards the end of the tour. Every day they set out all these nice candies and tea and coffee and water, and yeah, this is actually going on the way out because we've got wine and cheese with some beautiful Odessa wine. So this is the hotel in Mykolaiv. So sort of fast forwarding, no matter where we were, whether you were in Kiev or Mykolaiv or Odessa, whatever it is, they brought us, if you were closest sort of towards the east, they brought us all to one central place, which was the hotel. It says hotel in Ukrainian. And we're obviously getting ready to go. Dogs, there's wild dogs everywhere. And everybody befriended. It was pretty funny. So we're ready to get on the bus and go back to Lviv. And again, a little bit of a unique scenario with this particular tour because it was COVID. So above and beyond sort of the regular things that we do, we had to consider quarantine and things like that. So whereas we would have probably just left directly from whatever locations we were coming from, we had to go to Lviv the whole tour essentially and quarantine into this hotel. So first we had to test negative before we left our outstations. Then we would go to the hotel. We had to get a test there, and then we had to stay in the hotel as a group for a week before we left, and then have to get tested one more time. Unbelievably, with all of the things, all the places that we went and all the things that we did, out of I think like 100 people, one person had COVID. So it's a great testament to the Canadian Armed Forces medical staff that were with us and that put in those parameters and those places for us to go. And otherwise that could have been a bit of a disaster for us. This is Lviv. So this is the town square. We were allowed to go out for a short period of time to go and get a coffee. And this is the town square in Lviv. Beautiful, beautiful town. This is the Lviv airport. We're waiting for us to take off. We have our RCAF Airbus that is now retired, and we got a new one. She decided to snow on us the day we left. And basically, not like Pearson, you load your own kit.
Oh, wow.
For the whole airplane. That says Lviv, in Ukrainian. And that's us. That's the last photo I ever took in Ukraine. With one of my friends from the Camerons, who is now regular force RCR. So it was kind of a fitting last slide. So, basically, to wrap up, what I would say is it was a very rewarding experience. I would say that you can be very proud as Canadians of your Canadian Armed Forces and what we do. We don't have, right now, a whole lot, but we have excellent training and we have great people that believe in what they're doing and really went above and beyond. Whether it's this tour or Latvia or wherever we are in the world, you can rest assured that Canadian soldiers are amongst the best, if not the best, within the NATO countries. And I'd like to think that we actually contributed to some of the successes that the Ukrainians had, at least in the early days. They were able to hang on against those odds, almost impossible odds, until we could actually get through and provide them with kit and equipment and money. But they did it on their own. When we thought they were going to fall in 3 days, they said that Kyiv was going to fall in 3 days, and they didn't. And they, in fact, 3 months later, and then a year later, and now we're what, almost 4 years later. So you can be proud of that. And last thing I will say, specifically to Guelph, because this is the city of Guelph, and this is, the Guelph Civic Museum. Your regiment here, just down the road, has contributed a lot of soldiers over a very long period of time. If you want to start with the Boer War, South African War, World War I, World War II, Korea, UN, NATO, Afghanistan, and all of the operations that we're doing today, this regiment, the 11th Field Regiment, Royal Canadian Artillery, has contributed to every one of those conflicts and operations, constantly. So not a lot of people know that, but the city of Guelph has one regiment, and we've been here since the 1800s. And yeah, it's called Gunner Town. It used to be called Gunner Town for a reason. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you very much, Ken, for having me. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I'd be happy to take any questions, yes.
This may be a yes or no answer, but you were talking about the structure and middle of the NCOs,
Yes.
that level.
Mm-hmm.
I have read somewhere that because of the Soviet way of doing things,
Mm-hmm.
those guys didn't have any autonomy whatsoever
Mm-hmm.
in making decisions in the field.
Yeah, so we have a command structure that is layered. So we have a mission command, it's called mission command philosophy. So, we are able to come up with a plan, and that gets distilled down to every level. And every level of command trusts the next level down, that they know their job and that they're able to distill their piece down specifically to the group of people that they're leading. So the Soviet doctrine is not like that. It's kind of a straight line. So a lot of the ranks, and I won't speak exactly for it because I'm obviously not an expert in that, and definitely the Ukrainians have changed that way. But what we had been experiencing was sort of the last leftovers of that mentality, where a sergeant was just a sergeant in the sense that he happened to be in charge of a motor pool or something like that, and not any particular leadership per se, but maybe it was more kit and equipment logistically. So, I mean, a couple of the comments that we received were things like, well, how can I give, a subordinate a task? What if he screws it up? Well, what if everybody screws it up along the way? You have to have that mentality where you trust your soldiers and your subordinates below you, and you trust your commanders above. And it has gotten, the Soviet style sort of into trouble in some ways, because if you look at the operations that the Russians have been conducting, they've lost a lot of very senior officers. Because a senior officer, like even a general, will run out and start giving orders, in a convoy that has stopped. and wonder why, this particular vehicle isn't moving, well, that would never happen. That would be filtered down to the next higher level, and so it just works better. It's a proven system. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Perhaps along the lines, similar question, but is that what distinguishes the Canadian effort abroad? Like you mentioned that we're famous for the services and the training we provide. Is that it? Is it logistics and chain of command?
So
there's no battle experience per se?
it's every category. So we have, we've done several different missions across many different decades. And it just depends on what is needed. What skills can we bring to the table? So obviously in Afghanistan, that was a kinetic warfighting operation. And also there was some training there as well. We did mentor and train the Afghan Army and Afghan National Police and what have you. So we have been asked to do training all over the world. So whether that's Ukraine or Latvia or the Middle East, or in some cases smaller missions where there's not a lot of staff, doing very specific things. So maybe not a big group, but maybe at a higher level in a command and staff kind of function. So we can do it all. It's we can teach combat training. We can teach soldiers how to fight in a tank, on an artillery gun, in a jet, and whatever. And we can also teach them command and staff functions. So it's kind of the whole spectrum.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, thank you for your service, by the way.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Prior to the invasion, how convinced were the Ukrainians that this invasion was actually going to happen and the effort that you'd put in to do the training?
So I can't speak for what they thought. I wasn't there, and I'm not a Ukrainian soldier. But there had keep in mind that when we think of the war per se, we kind of think of it a lot from 2022 on because it's the full invasion. But they've been dealing with at least some sort of an invasion since 2014, because in 2014 is when the Russian Federation invaded Crimea and Donbass. So Donbass is the very eastern part of Ukraine where there's quite a lot of, so all the east is quite a lot of Russian speakers. And so there was a lot of separatists that believed that they should be part of Russia. So they leaned on that and they utilized sort of a separatist type of thing. So Ukrainians have been dealing with this for more than a decade in total. And then in terms of whether or not they knew that this was coming, I think somebody who was in the intelligence community could probably answer that better than me. But regardless, it happened, and thank God we're here to help, and everybody else.
Now, you also, on a different subject, you also mentioned that there's training now that happens in Germany, for example.
Yes.
Can you say where in Germany relative to Berlin?
So I don't know what we're doing in Germany. I know that we have staff functions and we have logistics and things. Germany is very much of a hub. And of course we used to have bases there like Lahr and Baden, which was serving for that function. But as to exactly what training is being done in Germany, I don't know. And don't forget, there's several nations. I think I pointed out there was 20 partner nations that were part of this whole training program. So every nation has maybe some of them are doing some of the same things, some of them are more specialized. So I can't comment really on what is happening in Germany. It's definitely a location. It's part of the Operation Unifier, right? Which is the Canadian, by the way, Operation Unifier. So every mission that we go on is an officially named operation, and that's the name that we have. For example, the British have Orbital. So same thing, same place, different nation, calling it a different name. Sorry I couldn't answer it fully, but yes.
Is it safe to assume that the training nowadays has evolved to take in the drone thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So our troops in Latvia right now are heavily involved with, building our drone capabilities, because it's a reality. Ukraine has shown us that drone warfare is a thing, and it's here to stay, and we need to be on top of that. But we're heavily investing in those technologies and AI and a whole bunch of things. Anything you want to find out about the Canadian Armed Forces and policies and what we're doing, you can go on forces.gc.ca, and it will tell you all the public information that can be given, the budget, the programs, all the different things that are happening. No secret. But again, I'm not an expert in everything, so I can't possibly answer the whole thing. Yes?
Yeah, when you were training, did you ever sort of butt heads and say, with the Ukrainians saying, we've done it this way forever, why we want to listen to you guys?
I wouldn't say butt heads, but I would say there would be some professional dialogue, in opinions. I would say, we had to be very cognizant about different cultures, and also they're inviting us into their country and us into their facility to teach them. And we were always very sure to be respectful, and maintain that professional. But yes, we would use examples where, okay, I see what you're saying. Here's how we do it. Do you have any questions about this, or can you see if any of these types of things would fit into your model? And a lot of times, basically what it was blending the two. So there were some aspects that they couldn't get rid of, like in their training plan for cadets from year 1 to 4, they just have a different structure, and they have different equipment and some different tactics. So they couldn't just cold turkey completely adopt. Now, some things they did. So, some things they asked us, can you write us a manual exactly like yours? And so we can just translate it into Ukrainian and move forward. But then as we went through several months and had different planning conferences and went through different items, it became apparent that we had to rejig a few things. But that's just all kind of sitting down and having a nice conversation about how we can help you, essentially. But yeah, not really any fights that way. Yes?
Jeff, within NATO and within Ukraine, you've got 20 different nations,
Mm-hmm.
20 different cultures, some more assertive than other cultures, I would say, but all working for NATO. Are some nations more successful than others, or do some nations get on other people's nerves in a hurry?
That's probably a personal opinion for whoever works with other nations and whatever specific experiences that they have. I never had any issues with any other partner nation that I worked with. I felt that we really integrated well, and I know for a fact I could be put into a British headquarters or a Dutch headquarters or whatever it is, or they could be put into mine, and I know what the training they have, because they have roughly the same training that I do. I know that they will integrate with us, no problem. When it comes down to personalities, Brian and I could have an argument being in the Canadian Army together on something because we don't agree with this move or that decision or whatever it is. It's just natural. But I would say within a NATO context, the whole point of it is to be as integrated as possible. So we try, by doing that, we avoid a lot of those issues that could come up. Anything beyond that is probably a personal thing, I would say.
Is there a common language, like in regards to that question?
Yeah, so the NATO standard language is English. So they may do, if it's just a German headquarters, they may speak in German, but if we have a multinational headquarters, it's English. My commanding officer here, Lieutenant Colonel Rashid, worked in a multinational context as well, and I'm sure
Yeah,
that's
even in the Middle East, when I was there, it's English basically. Even we are working with the Iraqis and who it is, army, it's English.
Mhm. So that helps. The same thing with international aviation standards.
Right.
So the language of air traffic control
I'm so sorry.
and aircraft are English. Yes.
With regards to the training, you're going back and forth with essentially people who had kind of a Russian-based initial training setups,
Mhm.
because it hasn't been that long since the Iron Wall fell. But what takeaways did you get from them that could be useful to us, other than the fact that to understand how the Russians work?
So at that point in time, the full-scale invasion hadn't happened, so
No.
other than the guys that were in Donbass, and that was very specific, sort of more guerrilla warfare kind of
Yeah.
training. Not a whole lot. I mean, now, yes, for sure. I mean, lots have changed since I was there. But I mean, anyone in the military in any nation, you get sitting down across the table and there's all sorts of interesting things and different ways of looking at it. You know, we do it this way. Oh, that's a really cool way to do it. And sometimes maybe we implement that. But it's, by that time, I think a lot of the Soviet had been sort of purged out of, like there was nobody left, there was no senior officers left
Yeah.
from the Soviet time. Because the Ukrainians have had their independence at that point. When I left, so I left in the spring, I think that June, they were having their 30th anniversary of the independence. So it's quite a long time. But just little leftover things, like I said, the logistics, and just gets into a sort of a habit and a standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
But they knew that we were there to help them change that, and they asked for it. They specifically asked NATO, we want to be NATO standard. And part of that was obviously them wanting to be part of the European Union community and NATO and all that. So not only to interoperate and modernize their military, but also to be able to work with NATO. So, yeah.
There have been some corruption issues with Ukrainian government. Did you encounter any of that in the military infrastructure and hierarchy?
No, we were very specific at what we did. So when we came in to do our job, the people that I saw were my students, my instructors, and the college head. And the only thing we ever talked about was training schedules and plans, and we didn't get in, and nor would I want to even ask them about any of that kind of stuff. Totally out of my bailiwick.
I wanted to ask, what would you say was the biggest challenge that the Ukrainians had difficulty overcoming when you and your team were training them? Was it based on military doctrine, culture?
Partially language, and partially understanding the translation. The translation might not be exact, and so just the connotation of, okay, I could give you this sentence or paragraph in a set of orders, but it might not really mean, even if it's translated perfectly, it might not mean the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think taking that extra time to step through everything from A to Z, like physically on a map, and take them through, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, then they would say, oh yeah, okay, you mean this. And so it just took a little bit extra time to sort of hammer that home. But it was very quick, once they sort of took up our ways of doing things, and it was like a routine and a rhythm, they were pretty good. Yeah. Yes?
I am probably misremembering, but it seems to me that, and this isn't Ukraine, but that Finland and Sweden have joined NATO rather recently. Is there some sort of military standard, or are there NATO training forces in Finland and Sweden now?
So I can't comment on that because I don't know. But if you're asking about NATO standard, is there a standard for NATO? Yes. So in order to be able to interoperate, as I was saying, with the training and getting everybody on the same page. So literally, we have a process, an operational planning process. Think of it as like a template, and there's several steps. And everybody in NATO knows how to do that. So I can go to Germany, I can go to Finland, I can go to France, I can do anything, and they will have the same template, and we go through the same process. And that's only one thing. There's tactics, and there's things that happen on the ground, tank tactics, infantry tactics, all that stuff, which are also the same standard. Orders formats where even your most junior person will give his section or her section a set of orders. Those are all standard as well, right down to the lowest level. So at every turn, there is a NATO standard, and although I don't know the exact process of getting into NATO, one would assume that there is a process and an evaluation, checks in the box, in order to get people to, a nation to get into NATO. But yeah, from a operational planning and tactical kind of level, then yes, there is a NATO standard.
Thank you for sharing that with us tonight. It really does speak to the importance of NATO.
Yes.
And its uniqueness in the world, around the world, I would think, on military operations, that so many countries can come together and operate the same.
Yeah.
You can see the strength in that. But there's so much bad press right now about NATO, especially coming from the Americans, who are big NATO members, of course. What can we do as citizens to support NATO?
Just keep doing what we're doing. So we have to be within our own lanes, and we have to be, whether that's, we are in the city of Guelph, support your local regiment. Cheer on 11th Field Regiment. Be a supporter and a fan of us, and be a fan of our armed forces as a whole. And that's all you need to do. We as individual citizens, although it's in your face all the time, we don't need to think that high, and that will just get you so confused and upset and everything. Start with what you've got right in front of you, and build that community, and I think that's the best you can do.
Your operation in Ukraine that existed before the formal Russian invasion.
Correct.
But Ukrainian troops are still being trained in NATO countries.
Yes, so what they do is they send them over to the partner nations.
Yes.
So they're out of harm's way, out of the battlefield, and they're training in a partner nation in our skills and tactics, the way that we would train our own soldiers. And then they're taking that knowledge, and at whatever level they're at, and going back to their units in Ukraine.
But is Canada involved in any of these training programs outside Ukraine?
Yes, absolutely. So as I was saying, from 2015 to 2022, we trained inside of Ukraine. And then since the full-scale invasion, we've moved our training areas to the UK primarily, and Poland primarily. There's some, like I said, there's some things in Germany, but primarily UK and Poland. And that's where we train them, and they'll come over by the hundreds or the thousands in whatever group they are in, and we'll train them for X amount of time on a course. They'll take that skill and knowledge, and they'll apply it back in Ukraine, in their home units.
Now, how big an operation does Canada have in that?
So as I said in my slide there, which you can find online on the forces.gc.ca, I think for Ukraine currently, it's fluctuated over the years, but it's about 300 at one given time, spread in different areas.
Thank you.
No problem.
A quick question, you showed the graduating class, is it a pass-fail, or is it like a percentage, or does everybody then go back into the field?
So I didn't see any failures, and I can tell you for real, it's not because we just passed them. They were actually excellent. They came prepared. So they had some sort of either experience or they had some sort of pre-training at their unit level. But when they came as a group, they were in the group that they worked with for real, like on the battlefield. And they came complete with their commander. And so they were already used to working with each other and working in some sort of fashion. But what we did was we improved their skills. And we got them on a system that was NATO standard, and they did really, really well. And I think that we put through, I want to say 4 or 5 courses, 4 or 5 different rotations of brigade staff. Anybody else?
Well, Colin, that was fantastic. Thank you
Well
again so much. Canadian forces are doing that we don't see every day. So that was amazing.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming. So our next lecture is not until January 2026, and it's on January 15th, and Austin Foster from the University of Guelph is going to talk on the history of War Memorial Hall, its controversy, and its really unique history of how it was created. Doug and I know I'm interested because my grandfather was in the class that helped dig the basement of the War Memorial Hall. So I'm really looking forward to the talk. So it's in January. And if you want to hear about these lectures, just sign up at the front desk and you'll get more information sent to you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming out.
Thanks, everybody.